This was supposed to be a simple father-daughter trip. A few days away, a chance to spend time together, take a break from routine, and make the kind of small memories families usually look back on years later. Instead, it became one of the most disturbing cases to shock communities in both Canada and the northeastern United States. 9-year-old Melina Frattolin was a cheerful child from Montreal. Friends and family described her as energetic and curious. She enjoyed drawing, dancing, and exploring new places. Like many kids her age, she had a wide imagination and an endless list of questions about the world around her. The kind of child who could turn a quiet room into a lively one just by walking in and asking, "Why does that work like that?" Her father, Luciano Frattolin, was 45 years old. He had planned what sounded like a fairly ordinary short trip. The idea was simple: drive through parts of Connecticut and New York, spend some time sightseeing, and then return to Montreal. Nothing extravagant, no luxury resorts, just a few days on the road. For Melina's mother, who had primary custody, this trip didn't raise any alarms. It was a routine visitation. Melina spent most of her time living with her mother, and her father had scheduled time with her. Situations like this happen every day in families across the world. The expectation was simple. Melina would enjoy a few days with her dad and then come home. For several days, everything seemed normal. Surveillance footage, later reviewed by investigators, showed the two of them moving through towns, stopping at stores, walking around together. To anyone watching casually, they looked like any other parent and child traveling together. They appeared relaxed, even happy. They talked, they laughed, they shared meals. Nothing about those moments suggested what was coming. On the evening of July 19th, around 6:30 p.m., Melina called her mother. The conversation was brief and ordinary. Her voice sounded calm and cheerful. She told her mother they were on their way back to Montreal. No distress, no fear, just a routine check-in. It would be the last time anyone heard her voice. A few hours later, events took a sudden and alarming turn. Shortly after 10 p.m., emergency dispatchers in Warren County, New York, received a 911 call. The caller was Luciano Frattolin. He sounded frantic. According to his story, he had pulled over along the highway near exit 22 on the Adirondack Northway. He said he needed to use the bathroom and had stepped away from the car for a moment. When he returned, he claimed, his daughter was gone. He told dispatchers that 2 men in a white van had abducted her. It was the kind of claim that immediately triggers alarm. Child abduction cases move fast because every minute counts. Law enforcement agencies know that the first hours are critical. Within a short time, an Amber Alert was issued. Police departments across the region began coordinating. Officers, search teams, helicopters, and volunteers mobilized quickly. Roads were monitored. Vehicles matching the description of a white van were watched closely. Communities across the Adirondacks began paying attention. Residents checked their properties and looked out their windows. News spread rapidly. Everyone hoped the story was exactly what Luciano said it was, a terrifying but solvable abduction. But investigators soon began noticing problems. First, there were no witnesses. No drivers reported seeing a van. No surveillance cameras captured one passing through nearby areas. In a region where highways, gas stations, and businesses are covered with cameras, that absence stood out. Then there was the scene itself. There were no signs of a struggle. No physical evidence suggesting someone had forced Melina into another vehicle. No items left behind. No disturbance near the roadside. As detectives carefully reviewed Luciano's account, more questions appeared. The timeline didn't quite line up. Details shifted slightly each time the story was told. Investigators have a lot of experience listening to people recount stressful situations. Small inconsistencies can happen naturally when someone is scared or in shock. But sometimes, those inconsistencies point to something else entirely. Gradually, Luciano's story began to unravel. Meanwhile, the search continued. Teams combed through forested areas and nearby waterways. Dogs followed scent trails. Helicopters scanned from above. Volunteers joined in, hoping they might be the ones to find Melina alive. The Adirondack region is vast and heavily wooded. It can be beautiful during the day, but it can also be difficult terrain for search efforts. Despite the massive response, there were still no signs of the supposed abductors. By the following day, the search shifted north. Near the town of Ticonderoga, roughly 30 miles north of Lake George, investigators focused on a remote area that required careful inspection. It was there that search teams made a devastating discovery. Melina's body was found in a shallow pond. She was face down in the water and partially concealed beneath a log. The discovery immediately changed the direction of the investigation. This was no longer a search for an abducted child. An autopsy later confirmed the cause of death as drowning, and the death was ruled a homicide. Investigators then began reconstructing the timeline more carefully. Phone records, location data, and surveillance footage were reviewed minute by minute. What they discovered was chilling. Melina had been killed sometime after the phone call with her mother and before the 911 call her father made later that night. That meant the story about two men in a white van was not just mistaken. It was fabricated. The van never existed. Every element of the abduction narrative had been invented. At that point, attention turned fully toward Luciano Frattolin. As detectives dug deeper into the family's background, they found a complicated history. Luciano and Melina's mother had separated in 2019. Melina lived primarily with her mother, and Luciano's contact with her was limited to visitation periods. Interestingly, there was no widely documented history of violence. No major criminal record. No obvious pattern of aggressive behavior that might have predicted something like this. From the outside, Luciano appeared to present himself as a devoted father. On his business website and social media pages, he often spoke about Melina with affection. In one description, he even referred to her as the light of his life. Statements like that sound heartfelt. Unfortunately, in true crime cases, investigators sometimes learn that public image and private reality don't always match. On July 21st, 2 days after the initial 911 call, Luciano Frattolin was arrested. He was charged with second-degree murder and concealment of a human corpse. He pleaded not guilty. He was held without bail while the investigation continued. For investigators, the next challenge was understanding why. Why would a father kill his own child? Was it a sudden burst of anger? A conflict that spiraled out of control? A custody dispute that escalated far beyond reason? Or something else entirely? These are the kinds of questions investigators face in many family-related homicide cases. The answers are rarely simple. Detectives reviewed every available piece of evidence. Phone records were examined closely. Travel routes were mapped. Surveillance footage from gas stations, roads, and businesses was analyzed. Each step of the trip was reconstructed. Every stop, every detour, every moment between the phone call to Melina's mother and the later call to emergency services. Forensic teams also examined the pond where Melina was found. They analyzed how the body had been concealed and studied the surrounding terrain. Family members, friends, and acquaintances were interviewed. Each person provided small pieces of information about Luciano, Melina, and the dynamics within the family. Sometimes those pieces fit together neatly. Sometimes they create more questions. The case quickly attracted national attention. Part of that attention came from the heartbreaking nature of the crime. Another reason was the unsettling reminder it delivered. Many people instinctively fear unknown dangers. The idea of strangers lurking in dark alleys or isolated roads has long been a common fear. But statistics and investigations repeatedly show something different.
In many tragic cases involving children, the person responsible is someone the child knows, someone trusted, someone close. That reality can be difficult for communities to process. In Montreal and parts of upstate New York, people mourned the loss of a young life. Vigils were organized. Candlelight gatherings brought residents together to remember Melina. Her school community struggled with grief. Friends asked questions that adults often find hard to answer. How could something like this happen? How could someone meant to protect a child become the one accused of harming her? As legal proceedings began moving forward, prosecutors focused on assembling a detailed case. Their task was not only to establish what happened, but also to demonstrate it clearly in court. Evidence had to be organized. Timelines had to be precise. Witness statements had to be verified. Meanwhile, defense attorneys began preparing their response. In criminal cases, every detail matters. Investigators continue to examine communications, travel patterns, and behavioral clues that might help explain the events of those final hours. While the legal process works slowly toward answers, the emotional impact of the case continues to ripple outward. Conversations about custody disputes, parental conflict, and child safety often follow tragedies like this. Experts frequently discuss warning signs that may or may not be visible before a crisis occurs. Unfortunately, many cases reveal that clear warning signs are not always obvious. Sometimes events unfold in ways no one could have predicted. For Melina, justice is still part of an ongoing process. But her story remains a powerful reminder of how fragile trust can be. A short trip meant for bonding ended in tragedy. A routine visit turned into a criminal investigation, and a community was left searching for answers that may never fully explain what happened. Melina Frattolin was 9 years old. She loved drawing. She loved dancing. She loved exploring the world with the curiosity that only children seem to have. Her life ended far too soon. And while investigators, lawyers, and courts work through the legal questions, one truth remains painfully clear. A child who should have returned home safely never did. That's another case closed here in the Rotten Swamp. The truth always surfaces, no matter how deep it's buried. If you're hungry for more dark mysteries, hit subscribe and ring that bell. Until next time, keep your doors locked and your secrets buried deeper than mine. This is Rotten Swamp, where justice never rots.